Well, hello. We continue in our Bible study of Genesis. We begin in chapter 6 today, and we learn from the death of Abel on that the moral condition of mankind didn't improve any at all. In fact, as we begin our lesson, we see that it's getting much worse. The moral degradation continued to expand. Even the imagination of man's heart was so depraved that God was forced to judge them. He does so with, of course, the great flood. God considered how sinful man had become, and nothing short of a complete reboot of mankind and nature would do. So let's begin with the first 5 verses here. It says, when men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. When God's judgment is brought upon mankind, Scripture plainly tells us why it came. We're given 2 reasons the great flood will come and destroy everything, essentially wiping the slate clean. The sins of the sons of God and the sins of mankind. We don't know exactly how much time has transpired here, but it is enough time for mankind to expand and multiply on a grand scale. Since men lived so long, some well over 900 years, their families must have been rather large. The population of the world would have skyrocketed quickly. It also makes sense that they also expanded over the face of the earth during this time, whatever the earth looked like at the time. Now, to something a little more controversial, verse 2 says that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, so they married them, any one of them they chose. Who were these sons of God? Well, there are several possibilities that have been proposed over history, but I'm going to confine it to 2. First, some believe that these sons of God were angels, fallen angels to be exact. In one ancient extra biblical book, the book of Enoch, it says that the children of men had multiplied and had beautiful daughters. The angels said to one another, come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men and beget us children. This was also a view held by many of the early church fathers. And what's more, the Old Testament almost exclusively uses the expression sons of God to describe angels. Plus, we find in the New Testament book of 2 Peter, he wrote in 2 Peter 2, verses 4 and 5, for if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them into gloomy dungeons to be held to judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others. Here, the judgment of the angels appears just before the flood, maybe even connected with the flood. Another interesting New Testament passage is found in Jude, verses 6 and 7. And the angels who do not keep their positions of authority, but abandon their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. So it seems that angels were connected with the sexual sins found in Sodom and Gomorrah. And while this is a wildly accepted theory that angels were the sons of God, it would assume angels could take bodily form and marry. But Jesus specifically says that angels cannot marry. So the second possibility that we're going to discuss is more likely, at least in my mind. This view is that the sons of God were the godly line of Seth. These men saw that the daughters of men, descendants of other children of Adam and Eve rather than Seth, that these women were beautiful and married them. These daughters of men then would be the daughters of essentially unbelievers. It would have been an unholy alliance of sorts. This alliance would produce not only problems in the marriage, but also, more than likely, unbelieving children. The Nephilim of verse 4 are also interesting. They're believed to be men of great stature, giants, if you will. They became great military men because of their strength and their height. The question is, were these Nephilim there before the sons of God married the daughters of men, or were they a product of these unions? Obviously, we don't know for sure. In any event, these men became widely known and really revered by many because of their strength and their stature. Verse 5 really brings out the problem with mankind. God looked out at man and saw just how wicked that they had become. Every inclination of their minds and their hearts were bent towards that which was evil. They had become a people of deprivation, death, sin. God could put up with it no longer. So we read in verses 6 and 7 of Genesis 6, the Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I have created, from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground, and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. Things had gotten so bad that God was sorry that he had even created man in the first place. Now, it isn't that God had decided he had made a mistake or that he was unsure of what would become of man before he created Adam and Eve. No, this just tells us that God had changed his attitude towards mankind because of their sin. He is pained because of their sin, and now is also pained knowing what has to come. He is both grieved and angry at the same time. God promises to wipe out man because all flesh had been corrupted. So all flesh would have to die. By the way, this certainly lends to the reality of a global flood. Some believe that it was just a localized flood in the Mesopotamian region of the world. This and what follows certainly suggest the universal global state of the coming flood. So let's read verses 8 through 10. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Even though mankind had gone from bad to worse, there was still one man who stood out in all mankind. He found grace, he found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And this is the first time we really come into contact with the idea of God's favor, or grace as we call it in the New Testament. In the midst of mankind's moral degradation, his depravity, his sin, Noah finds favor in the eyes of God. Compared to his contemporaries, he was a righteous man. He is like his pious ancestor Enoch, who was translated instead of experiencing death. He separated himself from the wickedness that he saw around him. He was blessed with 3 sons, though through Noah and his 3 sons, mankind, would get a reboot. Verse 11-12 says, "Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people of the earth had corrupted their ways." We have colossal human failure here. Man had corrupted his own way so bad that the entire earth, creation, was corrupted in the eyes of the Creator. He now looks down upon his creation and sees nothing but violence, corruption, of course, sin. There was no remedy at this point, only judgment to come. So verses 13-16 says, "So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Make a roof for it, and finish the ark to within 18 inches of the top. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks." God tells Noah not only why the destruction is coming, but what he must do to save himself and essentially save mankind. He is to make an ark. This word translated is Teba, and it is also used only one other place in the Old Testament, by the way, and it's used for the basket that the infant Noah was put in to save his life from drowning in the Nile. Now Noah would build an ark out of cypress wood or cedar wood. The actual type of wood is really not known for sure. The measurements we read for the ark in the NIV might be slightly larger or smaller than what the actual ark was, since cubits were used as the measuring units for the ark. These dimensions could vary depending on what kind of cubit you were using. The royal cubit was actually between 23-25 inches, so essentially 2 foot, and the small cubit was essentially a foot and a half. If we use the small cubit, then the ark would have been around the measurements that the NIV says, and but just to get an idea of the size here, this would make approximately 95,700 square feet total on the 3 decks, and about 1.4 million cubic feet. Using the royal cubit would bring that figure to nearly 4 million cubic feet. There's a big difference there, I know. But whatever the case, the ark had at least the cubic volume of 522 boxcars, train boxcars, and possibly as many as 1,400, of course, if the royal cubit was used. So it wasn't small at all. This ratio is still a great rule of thumb when it comes to building a vessel today. When filled, the possibility of it capsizing was minimal. So that's why it's still being used today. To ensure there was adequate light and circulation, it apparently had a window or opening at the top, at least 18 inches all the way around. Needless to say, the ark was well designed. It was designed to keep Noah, his family, and as we'll see, all the animals safe and dry during this coming global flood. Verses 17 and 18 says, "I'm going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens. Every creature that has the breath of life in it, everything on earth will perish, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you." It's interesting to note here that God told Noah to build the ark before he told the man why he was going to have to build the ark. he now tells him why. There's a flood coming that will destroy all life under the heavens. Everything that breathes air will just not going to survive. Again, it would be a global flood to kill all life upon earth. God also promises here a covenant with Noah, along with sweeping judgment that was to come. We will find out later what that covenant is with Noah. Noah and his family would enter into the ark as commanded by God before that flood sweeps over the earth and wipes it clean. Verses 19 through 22 says, "You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you, 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them." Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Noah and his family will not only not be the only occupants of the ark. It would have been a big waste of space otherwise, right? The ark would be filled with all kinds of animals, 1 male and 1 female of each kind. We'll find out in chapter 7 that the only exception would be the clean animals. There would be either 7 each or 7 pairs of each of the clean animals, depending upon the translation you're looking at. But perhaps for food or sacrifice, or both, following the flood. Some would say that there's no way 2 of every animal on earth could fit in the ark. Well, it's been proposed that only about 35,000 vertebrate animals would have been necessary to perpetuate all the breeds of animals that we have today. All that would need to go in is 2 of every kind of animal. Plus, many of the reptiles would have been brought in, no doubt, as juveniles, since they can breed at a very early age. God had it all planned out. He even had a plan on how the animals would get there. They would come to Noah. But Noah just had to reveal his faith in God by listening and doing what he was commanded to do. If he followed God's directions, his family would be saved. In the New Testament, we read this in Hebrews 11:7. "By faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith." This huge ark being built in a rather arid region of the world would certainly stand out. Imagine building a huge boat on dry land away from any body of water during this time in history. No doubt he was being mocked daily for undertaking such a task. But this ark stood as a testimony of Noah's faith and, well, the world's sin, their condemnation. It was a mammoth billboard screaming out to the world that the flood was coming, judgment was coming, and yet nobody listened to God's messenger when he told him God's message. May God bless you till we meet again for chapter 7 of Genesis. May God give you peace.